Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. If you could just hear me, if you can hear me, can you put something in the chat just so that I know? Good stuff. I'll just wait a few more moments as there's quite a few people still coming in. Okay, I think we'll get started as we've only got half an hour. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me this afternoon for this session on using Zapier. My name's Rowan and I'm Operations Director at App Advisory Plus. I've been in this role for just about a year now, and prior to this, I was Head of Cloud Services at PJCO Accountants at the time that we became QuickBooks UK Firm of the Future. In this session, I'm going to briefly run through the fundamentals of Zapier and how to get into a Zapier mindset. And then I'm going to go through some examples of how to use automation in your practice and for your clients using Zapier. So we've only got 30 minutes for this session, and if I have time, I would like to take some questions. So pop them in the chat as we go along. I'll do my best to answer them. So let's get into it. Okay, so the basis for anyone that's not familiar with Zapier already, it's useful just to give a brief overview of how it works. So the basis of any Zap is using a trigger and then one or more actions. So a trigger in Zapier is effectively it's an event that happens in an app, and as soon as that event takes place, if you've got a Zap set up, then it will run effectively as soon as that trigger is as soon as that event has happened. And broadly, the trigger points for any app are new data being created in the app or existing data has been updated. And the more trigger points that are available in the Zapier integration, both for data created or updated, the better, because you'll be able to get more data out of that app to use elsewhere. So the other side of a Zap is we've got the action, and that is something that you want to either find in a different app or update or create new data in that app. Triggers will often be for what I would call a parent piece of data. So if I take this into an example, if we looked at practice ignition's trigger, which is proposal state changed, this will happen every time that that proposal state changes, regardless of what the status actually is. But if we want to have actions that are based on specific statuses, then we have to do a second stage to the trigger, which would be using a filter. So you can use filters if you have at least a starter account in Zapier, and that's because they form part of a multiple step Zap rather than the two-step Zaps that are available on free accounts. So in essence, what filters allow us to do is specify whether a Zap should continue based on a specific piece of data meeting one or more specified conditions. So to start with, if we look at the left-hand side of that, you would select a piece of data in the trigger app or another app in the previous steps that you wanted the filter to be based on. Then you set a condition it should have from a preset list. And finally, you enter the value that you want to filter by. So these are the 17 preset conditions that you can choose for the filter, and these will pretty much cover everything that you need in terms of filtering. Sometimes you're going to want to have different actions for different variations of a data field. So again, if we looked at that example there, proposal state changed, we might want to run different actions based on what that status is. And I've got an example there for awaiting acceptance, proposal 1, or proposal lost. Here we could either create multiple zaps that have different filters, and that would be more suited to someone that's on a starter account. Or you can use something called paths, which I've demonstrated in this example, but you can only use the paths option if you're on Zapier's professional tier plan, which starts at around $60 per month. The pathways are a bit of a slicker option because they keep everything in one zap, but the outcome would be the same if you had multiple zaps. You can only add 3 paths to any zap, but you can have paths within a path. So if, for instance, you had more than 3 variations, what you could do is set up an additional path within one path. And to do that, you would need to set up the first filter for the path as an OR function for the filter. So it could meet 1 or 2 or more conditions, and then you would have your next path to filter down to what those options were, and you could keep doing that until you met all of the variations that you had. Sometimes after a trigger event, we have to change something about the way that data is presented in one app to be usable in another. And for that data, sorry, we've just got a question here. So sometimes after a trigger event, we have to change the way something's completed to make it more usable. And here Zapier has formatting options. And I'll go through these briefly. So for instance, on the first option that you see there, which is text, if one app presents, say, a full name, if you've done a form and you've got the full name of someone, but in the next app, you only wanted to use their first name, you could use a formatter, text formatter, to split the first name and last name so that you could only use the first name. If I go through some more, in the numbers formatter, you could use, say, a calculation to calculate the total value of a proposal across a year or a lifetime, using the data within either Go Proposal or Practice Ignition that you've pulled out from the trigger. Another example is date and time formatting. So here you might have, say, 0 whenever you pull data from 0, they have a very long date and time format for events. You can change that into a smaller format, or you might want to change the format from a US date to a UK date, and that's where you use the date or time formatter. Sometimes you need to use a utilities formatter, and an example of this is a lookup table. And in this example, we have a lookup key, which is a Practice Ignition service. And what we're doing here with the table is trying to identify the service and then transform it into a format which is readable by our next app. And in this case, it's Pixie. So this is what you would use if you're integrating Practice Ignition and Pixie, and it would be a similar thing if you're integrating Go Proposal and Pixie. You have a lookup for what the service is, and then you have a table here which picks out what the service is called in Pixie, and then you can apply that template to the new client that you've got once you've won the proposal. Just one more example of formatting in Zapier, and this is where you have a new lead that comes through, say from QuickBooks Find an Accountant directory. One of the challenges with this is being able to quickly respond, and with that you might want an automatic response. When QuickBooks sends you the data, the email address of the person that you need to reply to is held within the body of the email. So what you need to do is once the email comes in, either to Gmail or to Outlook, you can use the text formatter here to extract the email address from the body of the email. And then you can either set up a next stage Zap to send an automatic reply, or you might add them to your sales CRM and have the reply automatically go out in there for them to book in a meeting, say, or you might subscribe them to a new leads list in your MailChimp account and send out a campaign to them through that. So next I want to just cover briefly kind of the process that I would go through when I'm considering whether something should be or could be used I could automate something using Zapier. So to start with, I think, what is my problem? Is there a native integration, and does it do what I want to do? That's my first point of call. If I can't solve my problem using that, then I'd move next down to do the apps that I need to move data between have Zapier integrations? And it's really easy to identify whether they do have Zapier integrations. You just go to your Zapier account and then you can start from this menu here, search for the apps. So this one's the trigger app and this one's the action app. And if they have an integration, then that could be an option for you. But you then have to consider, does the trigger get the data that I need? And then does the action put the data, is the action available that I want? Now, after you've done that, you still then need to identify whether what the cost benefit is for actually automating this, because there might be some setup work involved. You've also got to consider the marginal costs of a task in Zapier relative to your plan to see whether it's worthwhile to actually automate it. So it's really important to have that use case and cost benefit analysis. So next I'm going to go into some examples of what we can do with Zapier. And the first one is one that maybe you're familiar with already, but it's good to reiterate that this is a really key thing that you can do in Zapier. And that's notifications. So I've got obviously some logos there of examples. And what we'd be looking to do with notifications are, these are always going to be mostly going to be action steps. So something's happened in a different app, a trigger, and you want to send a notification out to the place that you look for these kind of things, or your team goes for these kind of things. So you could send a message to a Slack channel, a Teams channel, to your Google Hangouts Messenger if you use that, Facebook groups you can send things to. Obviously, then you've also got Gmail and Outlook notifications as well. And I've put this one first because all of the different Zaps that I'm going to show you next, you could add a notification step into pretty easily as part of whatever Zap you're working on. So what I want to show you here is what you can do kind of with accounting platforms that link to Zapier. And as far as I'm aware, there's only really 3 accounting platforms with Zapier integrations, Xero, QuickBooks, and Free Agent. The Free Agent one is very not very sophisticated compared to Xero and QuickBooks, and you can do a lot more with that integration. And I've put up a comparison of the integrations on our website, App Advisory Plus, if you need to understand what these what the triggers and the actions that are available in QuickBooks and Xero are. And this will give you help you to understand kind of the things that you can start to look to automate in these with QuickBooks and Xero. I've got some examples here to go through. So the first one is we've got a new transaction. What we could do, this might be an invoice, a sales invoice. We could create a new row in Google Sheets, and then we might use that for reporting. And this would be useful if your reporting app didn't do exactly what you want. Excel or Google Sheets might be a bit more flexible than what those are, and you could use those. Then I've got two interesting ones here, and these are to do with approval workflows. So with if you're using Approval Max for approval workflows, there's two things that it doesn't do. One is notify whoever created the invoice once it's been approved, and another is actually sending the invoice once it's gone through those approval stages. So if we go to these, I'll just show you what that looks like in Zapier. So for the first one, we have a new sales invoice into Xero. Here, what we're using to send the notification email to someone to say it's been approved is the tracking category. So I have Xero presents the tracking categories together. So first we need to use a formatter to split these out, and Xero separates them by a comma. So that's where that's what we do there to separate the tracking categories. And then I've got a Google Sheet here, which has an email address of every tracking category. So we look up the tracking category in the Google a column, and then in the adjacent column there's an email, and we pick the email and then send a notification to that email to say that it's been done. Then we've got one more here, which is to actually send the invoice. This is, here we go, we've got a new sales invoice in Xero, and this is with the status awaiting payment. It's gone through the approval process, so this is the first time that it has reached this stage. So Xero will pick this up for only the first time that it reaches the stage. And then we can use this action, which is to send the sales invoice using Xero. Another example here, you could, if there's a new bill or expense goes into your Xero or QuickBooks and it doesn't have an attachment, you could filter to see if it has an attachment. You could then go and request that attachment from the client for them to put it in, or put it into Receipt Bank. And then I've got some other examples of actions that you could do here. For instance, update contact details in Xero or QuickBooks from your CRM practice management system, or from a form that you might send out to get the details updated. You could update an invoice with links or attachments from, I don't know, any kind of project that someone's working on, or a spreadsheet. And I've got another one here, create estimate or invoice from a form response. So if you've got a client that uses a form software to help them generate quotes, then you could take data from that and then automatically create an estimate or an invoice straight into Google or Xero, QuickBooks or Xero. I won't go into the Receipt Bank Zapier integration too much, but those are these are the basic things that you can do with it. It is quite basic. So the only trigger is a notification when a certain amount of transactions have been processed. So that might be useful if you only want to do the bookkeeping once you've got a reasonable amount of data to use. You could have an action here to submit a receipt to Receipt Bank. So if the client is using a Dropbox or Drive and they don't want to change their practice from doing that, then you could set up a Zap which picked up whenever a new item went into there and then submitted it to Receipt Bank. And you could also here set up a Receipt Bank account for a client if they've accepted a proposal from you and Receipt Bank is in there as a service, for instance, or you could just do it for every client if you use them for every client. Here's an example of a lead management system which you can build out using Zapier, and there's lots of examples in here. So you could have an inquiry form move into Pipedrive or a different sales CRM. You could have that add a contact to MailChimp. We've got Calendly appointments coming out of this, and there's actually there's a better booking software for a Zapier integration called Acuity, because the Calendly one you can action, it triggers off meetings booked or meetings cancelled, but not meetings rearranged, whereas the Acuity one will trigger off meetings rearranged as well. You've got things like proposals in here. As soon as they're created, you could update the stage in your pipeline so that it moves along automatically, and you're always aware of where a lead is in its life cycle. And then kind of when it's sent, you could update it again. You can update the value when things are sent. And it might be easier if I just go into my example here and show you some of the apps that we have. So as part of this overall process that you've just seen, there's lots of Zaps in here which make up all of that. You can do follow-ups, for instance, in Pipedrive or a different CRM if a lead had been inactive for a certain amount of time. So those are some options there. I'll run through this as quickly as I can, so we've only got 8 minutes left. So let's have a look at some of the form ones. If you get a new inquiry, this one's useful, this top one, if you've got different pipelines in a CRM that are based on a location, or they're based on, I don't know, a partner. One partner has one pipeline, another partner has another pipeline. If it doesn't matter if it's not based on postcode, but just an example, if it was based on postcode, you could pick up that from the inquiry form and then add it to the correct CRM pipeline based on what the postcode was. You could also add in a link to the form submission. Underneath there, I've got a new form response. If they've opted in to receive communications from you, you could add them to a MailChimp group and then have MailChimp automatically send a campaign to your prospect ticked with the services that they're interested in from the fact find. You can use dynamic content in MailChimp if you've got the right level of account. You could use forms to update some information in your practice management software. So this is an example with Center. We've got a new entry in Cognito Forms. We're finding the client and then we're going to update their data based on the entries that are within the form. And obviously we can do notifications based on forms as well. Booking apps, I've gone through this a little bit already, but effectively here are some examples of what you can do with those. Update pipeline stage once a meeting's booked, add a record of appointment. You could add a record of any meeting that you have with a client in Center. They're the only practice management system with the ability to add a note to a client record. So that would work well there. There weren't too many that you could add a timesheet entry for the meeting time, but Harvest project management software and QuickBooks would allow you to do that. And then obviously you've got some notifications as well. MailChimp, there's loads that you can do here. Here's three that I like. While I use this as well for App Advisory Plus, we've got subscribe, unsubscribe data, going to Google Sheets for reporting, new orders in your e-commerce store, or for your client's e-commerce store, you could add tags or a field and then start marketing campaigns based on that. I've gone through the accepted proposal one in that lead management diagram that I showed you, and here's an example of something that we use at App Advisory Plus. So if we've got someone new signs up to WooCommerce, we can, and this is for a free account, we can add them to MailChimp, so as part of our subscriber audience. So there's some examples there. In terms of proposals, Practice Ignition and now Go Proposal both have Zapier integrations. Go Proposal one's quite new, and I've done an article that explains what that is if you look on our site. Again, we can update the stage of our leads as proposals are created, and if you're using Practice Ignition, that you can update them as soon as they're updated as well. Go Proposal doesn't have that option. You could create work items in your practice management system, whether that be Pixie or Center, through from Practice Ignition accepted proposals, for instance, or you could go proposal to Pixie as soon as a Go proposal has been accepted. I saw Lesser & Co are running a Zap which donates to charity through B1G1 as soon as they have an accepted proposal. So there's something that you can do there as well. In terms of practice management, I've ran a comparison which people might find useful of the types of triggers and actions that you can do with Pixie, Carbon and Center. And a Glide is preparing a Zapier integration as well. But this will give you an idea of what you can do with those. And that was very quick to run through all of that, and we've got 3 minutes left for questions. So let's see if we've got any. I've got one about forms. Does this work with Microsoft Forms, for instance? If I want pieces of information automatically extrapolated from the form and inserted into a row in a spreadsheet. So what you would do there is if we go to, let's go to Zapier, and I'm not exactly sure which form software Microsoft use, but it doesn't look like it's there unless I'm not typing it in right. But what I would do in your case is go through here once you know what the name is, click on it, and then you'll be able to see what the triggers are. Most of the triggers for forms will be new submission, and then you'll be able to get the data. So if it is available as an integration, then yes, I would say that you can do that. Can I send out the slides? Yes, I'll send out an email with the slides after this, as well as links to some resources that I'm now going to show you as well. So in terms of where you can go for additional information, I've got a blog which has lots of resources on how you can understand Zapier, including some detailed run-throughs of Zaps that you can use. Our App Advisory Plus directory has a Zapier filter. So if you want to search for an app which has an integration with Zapier, if you scroll down our directory here, there's filters. It filters all non-accounting integrations, but if you just wanted Zapier, you click that there, and then this will show you all of the apps on our platform which have integrations with Zapier, and you might also say, I want that to have integration with Zapier and Xero, and this will show you which has both integrations with Zapier and Xero. We do implementations for accountants and their clients using Zapier. So the best thing to do if you want some more help is to get in touch, and we'll give you a free 15-minute Zapier consultation, and you can use that link to book one of those in, which I'll also send out in the follow-up. And lastly, if you got something out of this session, please do go to experts.zapier.com/app advisory plus, and please leave me a nice review to say that you got something out of the session. We're part of Zapier's Certified Experts program, which has recently launched, and we're looking to build our reviews in there. If you do have any questions that I haven't answered, or you want me to run through something in more detail, I'm happy to do so. Just either book in a consultation with me, or go to appadvisoryplus.com and fill in the contact form here, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Just one more question. Do you know if there are any plans to have an integration with Accountancy Manager? I don't at the moment, no. That would be one to take up with Accountancy Manager directly, but I know that they are planning more integrations. So maybe that will be on their list of things to do. Okay, well, thanks for attending the session, and I hope you've all found it useful, and enjoy the rest of your day.